Scotland, the land of kilts, whiskey and some truly bizarre bedtime stories. Today we're diving into 5 of Scotland's wildest myths and legends. Trust me, it's about to get weirder than you thought possible. Welcome to Loch Ness, home to Scotland's most famous resident. No, not Sean Connery, we're talking about Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. This lake is supposedly big enough to hide the world's sneakiest, most camera-shy sea creature. Let's be honest, Nessie is basically Bigfoot's aquatic cousin. People swear they've seen her, they've taken fuzzy photos, and some of them are probably still staring at this lake, hoping for a glimpse. It's like looking for Waldo, except Waldo's underwater, and possibly a dinosaur. Legend has it, the first sighting was back in the 6th century, when St. Columba supposedly saw Nessie attack a man. But here's the kicker. Columba banished Nessie with a prayer. That's right, a quick prayer, and the sea monster turned tail. The real miracle? Columba convinced anyone to believe that story in the first place. For centuries, people have spotted Nessie, and thanks to the miracle of the camera, we have evidence, if you squint. Thousands of blurry photos of sticks, rocks, and shadows. And then there's that famous 1934 surgeon's photograph, which turned out to be a toy submarine with a model head glued on, a true Hollywood blockbuster right there. And yet that one photo was enough to launch 1,000 Nessie documentaries, books, and of course keychains. Who needs science when you have imagination, and really low camera quality? Let's consider the facts. Loch Ness is over 20 miles long, 700 feet deep, and holds more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. In theory, yeah, something could hide in there. Maybe a monster, maybe just a fish with an ego problem. But scientists, and we mean actual degree-holding scientists, have scanned this lake with sonar, drones and underwater robots. The result? No monster, just a whole lot of murky water and...
Och, Nessie? Aye, she's probably out there, somewhere, or maybe just in my uncle's stories after a few drams of whiskey.
So, is Nessie real? That depends. If you're the type to see monsters in every ripple and log, then sure, she's alive and well. But for the rest of us, she's just a great excuse to take a boat ride and buy a plushie. Next, we have the Selkies, those seal-turned human heartthrobs of Scottish folklore. You know, because regular dating isn't complicated enough, some people decided, hey, what if my soulmate was also a sea mammal? Yes, according to legend, these Selkies spent half their lives lounging in the sea as regular old seals. But on certain moonlit nights, they get to shed their skins and step ashore as irresistible, slightly damp humans. Think of it as Scotland's answer to the tall, dark and mysterious stranger, except this one is slimy and smells like the ocean. The lore goes something like this. Selkies are so beautiful that any poor human who crosses paths with one is basically doomed to fall in love instantly. Forget personality or a sense of humor. When you're a magical sea person, you bring your own hype. Now, here's where things get tricky. The only way to keep a Selkie around is to hide their seal skin. That's right, forget talking it out. Just stash their fishy coat somewhere safe, and presto, you've got a reluctant, magical spouse. If you're thinking, that sounds a bit creepy, well, you're absolutely right. In Scottish folklore, romance often involves stealing someone's literal skin and forcing them to stick around. But hey, if it works, right? So, with no other options, the Selkie settles down, marries his captor and even has a few kids. All the while he's probably just counting down the days until he can find that skin and head back to the sea. Classic fairy tale ending. But as every tragic love story goes, eventually the Selkie stumbles upon his skin again. Maybe he finds it hidden under a rock. Or maybe he's just had enough of the whole living in a small cottage thing. Either way, once he gets his hands on that skin, it's goodbye family, hello freedom. And just like that, he slips back into the ocean, abandoning his human life for the open seas. Romantic, right? Moral of the story? If your love interest looks like they're one fur coat away from ditching you, maybe don't hide it under the floorboards. The tale of the Selkie has a few variations. Sometimes the woman finds her own Selkie husband, sometimes it's the other way around. But in the end, it's always the same. Love may be magical, but it's no match for the call of the ocean. So next time you're on the Scottish coast and you spot a particularly charming seal, maybe think twice before trying to bring it home. You might end up with a short-lived romance and some major abandonment issues. Meet the Cailleach Bheur, Scotland's winter witch, or as some might say, the grumpiest old woman you'll never meet. She's not your typical mystical wise woman. She's more of a crotchety weather overlord who's got a bone to pick with spring. Legend has it, the Cailleach Bheur is responsible for whipping up winter storms, freezing rivers, and in general, making sure that Scotland stays nice and frosty. With a big old hammer in hand, she's said to shape the landscape, making mountains and valleys just because she can. Who needs geology when you've got a hammer-wielding snow queen? You'd think this much power would come with some rules, or at least a warning label. But no, the Cailleach does winter her way, unfiltered, unbothered, and unapologetically chilly. In her mind, anything green and growing is basically a personal insult. If she sees so much as a sprout, she'll freeze it in its tracks. Think of her as the world's least enthusiastic gardener. Now, she doesn't have this job forever. Every year, the Cailleach reigns over winter until Beltane. That's May 1st for those keeping track. On that day, she hands over her power and spring finally gets its turn. Until then, she's basically the boss of cold, and she's not exactly known for her flexibility. Think of her as that one co-worker who refuses to leave the office at closing time. She'll keep winter going as long as she possibly can. Snowstorms, icy winds, the works. After all, who needs sunshine and warmth? And let's be honest, she's got a bit of a flair for the dramatic. Why bring a mild frost when you can freeze an entire valley? But, like any power-hungry boss, the Cailleach's reign has its limits. When Beltane finally rolls around, her winter days are done, whether she likes it or not. And let's just say, she doesn't take it well. When spring arrives, it's like the world's biggest eviction notice, and the Cailleach, she's not exactly thrilled about it. According to legend, when the Cailleach's power fades, she either turns to stone or goes into hiding, waiting for her big comeback next winter. Think of it as a really dramatic seasonal time out. So, next time you're caught in an unexpected April snowstorm, remember, that's just the Cailleach making one last-ditch attempt to keep winter going. She'll be back next year, bringing her frosty attitude with, because in Scotland, winter's never quite over. Not until the Cailleach says so. And even then, she's probably rolling her eyes the whole way out. And now, we venture into the woods to meet one of Scotland's more eccentric legends, the Ghillie Dhu, the forest spirit who's either your best friend or your worst nightmare, depending on how polite you are. The Ghillie Dhu is said to be a gentle guardian of the forest. But here's the catch. He doesn't suffer fools. Disrespect the forest, and you might just find yourself being escorted out, with a few bruises for the road. Nature's bouncer, if you will. Now the Ghillie Dhu isn't interested in your selfies or your trail mix. He's got one rule: respect the forest. Walk gently, appreciate the beauty, and don't even think about littering. Otherwise, this pint-sized eco-warrior might decide you need a lesson in tree etiquette. Legend has it, if you lose your way in the forest, the Ghillie Dhu might just guide you back to safety. But only if you're respectful and, preferably, lost after dark. Because nothing says trustworthy guide like a shadowy figure leading you through the woods at midnight. So there you are, deep in the woods, wondering if this leafy little creature is actually helping, or just leading you to your doom. Spoiler alert, he's doing both. The Ghillie Dhu isn't your typical friendly guide. He's the type to take you the scenic route, complete with low-hanging branches and suspiciously slippery rocks. But if you manage to keep up without cursing every tree in sight, the Ghillie Dhu might just show you a hidden glen or a babbling brook, nature's rewards for good behavior. And when you finally make it out, he'll disappear as mysteriously as he arrived. No thank yous required or accepted. Now some say he's just a story to keep people from littering and wandering off trails. But others, they swear they've seen him. After all, Scotland's forests have a way of making you feel like you're being watched. So, next time you're out in the Scottish woods, be on your best behavior. And if you hear leaves rustling or spot a tiny green-haired figure watching from the shadows, just smile politely. Who knows? You might earn yourself a friend in high places, or at least avoid a thorny trip through the brambles. Because in Scotland, even the trees have eyes, and the Ghillie Dhu is always watching. Finally, we come to one of Scotland's more charming characters, the Redcap. Picture a tiny, grumpy goblin with a serious case of anger management issues and a disturbing fashion sense. Welcome to the Scottish borders, where these little nightmares like to call the ruins of old castles home. Guess that cap of his? It's red because it's soaked in blood, his enemy's blood no less. Apparently nothing says style like a hat that doubles as a murder confession. They say the Redcap keeps his hat red because if it ever dries out, he dies. So he's constantly reapplying. A bit of a high-maintenance routine, but when your life literally depends on accessorizing, you make it work. Redcaps don't just hang around abandoned castles for the atmosphere. Oh no, they're here for a reason, lurking and waiting for travelers who dare to wander too close. To a Redcap, anyone trespassing is basically a free lunch. And by lunch, we mean victim for their next art project. The rules are simple. If you see a Redcap, you run. Fast. These pint-sized nightmares may have little legs, but they're said to be terrifyingly quick. And if they catch you? Well, let's just say your sightseeing trip might come to a colourful end. Now, there is one way to escape a Redcap. And no, it doesn't involve fighting back. The only thing that scares these creatures is a Bible or any type of holy verse. So, in a pinch, you might survive by reciting some scripture. Just hope you remember it quickly enough. Guess? The power of the word, or even a decent app, is enough to send this bloodthirsty goblin packing. But remember, if you're visiting the borders, keep an eye out. You never know when one might pop up, ready to redecorate. And while you might think he's just a scary story to keep tourists away from the ruins, locals say otherwise. A few odd sightings, some eerie whispers, that creepy feeling you get when you're out there alone, could just be a Redcap, sizing up your hat size. So, next time you're wandering the Scottish borders, keep your Bible app handy. And for the love of all things tartan, avoid abandoned castles. The Redcaps might be tiny, but they've got big plans for that hat of yours. So, there you have it. Scotland's strangest, funniest and most ominous legends. Are any of them true? Well, that depends on how much whiskey you've had. Because here in Scotland, it's never just rain and whiskey. Sometimes it's a monster, a forest man, or a little guy with a red cap and a grudge. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe. See you next time.